The WNBA just had its single biggest opportunity to prove it belongs on the same stage as every major professional sports league in North America. And somehow, in the span of 30 minutes, they managed to turn one of the most anticipated events in recent league history into something that felt like reading a corporate memo out loud. After 18 months of collective bargaining negotiations that had fans genuinely questioning whether there would even be a 2026 season, after record-breaking viewership numbers and attendance figures that shattered every benchmark the league had ever set, after players like Caitlin Clark and Reese and A'ja Wilson became legitimate household names that transcended basketball entirely, the WNBA delivered its first major event under the new CBA, the Expansion Draft for the Portland Fire and Toronto Tempo, two brand new franchises, one of them the first Canadian team in league history. And what the fans got was a half-hour broadcast where names popped up on a screen while general managers, nobody outside of hardcore circles could identify, got extended interview segments. No drama, no build-up, no theater, just a checklist being completed in real time while the most engaged audience in WNBA history watched in disbelief. This wasn't just underwhelming. This was a league fumbling its defining moment. To understand why this expansion draft stung the way it did, you have to rewind and appreciate what led up to it. For roughly a year and a half, the WNBA and its players were locked in CBA negotiations that at various points looked like they might not reach a resolution. There were stretches where fans didn't know if there would be a 2026 season at all. Social media was filled with anxious speculation. Would players sit out? Would the league lock them out? Would everything the sport had built over the last few years come crashing down because the business side couldn't get it together? That kind of uncertainty doesn't just create tension among players and executives. It seeps into the fan base. People who had just fallen in love with the WNBA through Caitlin Clark's electrifying rookie campaign, through Reese's dominance on the boards, through A'ja Wilson continuing to prove she's one of the most complete players in basketball, regardless of gender. Those fans were suddenly confronted with the possibility that the thing they just discovered might vanish before the next season even tipped off. And then it resolved. The new CBA came through with groundbreaking financial terms. Players were going to earn more than they ever had. Revenue sharing models improved. New opportunities opened up. End quote. The relief was palpable. The excitement was immediate. And the anticipation for what came next was enormous. Because what came next was supposed to be a celebration. Two new franchises entering the league. Portland getting a professional women's basketball team. Toronto becoming the first international market in WNBA history. Expansion means growth. Growth means the league is healthy, thriving, moving in the right direction. Fans didn't just want to watch the expansion draft. They were counting down to it. Protection lists became a topic of heated debate across every WNBA community online. Which 6 players would each team protect? Who was vulnerable? Would Portland target shooters or defenders? Would Toronto go after veteran presence or young upside? People were running mock drafts, building spreadsheets, arguing in comment sections about whether certain role players were more valuable than others. Tickets for both new franchises were selling before anyone even knew who would be on the rosters. That level of organic engagement is something most sports leagues spend millions trying to manufacture. The WNBA had it handed to them on a silver platter, and then they served a 30-minute slideshow. Here is exactly what happened during the broadcast, because the details matter. The expansion draft aired, and within the first few minutes, the top selections were already announced. There were no dramatic pauses, no envelope openings, no split-screen shots of players watching from their living rooms, reacting in real time to hearing their names called. No highlight packages showcasing each selected player's best moments, their career arcs, what they meant to the teams they were leaving. Instead, names appeared on screen. Graphics popped up. General managers from Portland and Toronto got interview segments where they discussed their strategies, which might be interesting content for a podcast deep dive, but is absolutely not what you lead with during a live televised event that casual fans are tuning into. The players, the human beings whose lives were changing in that moment, the actual product that fans care about, they were reduced to text on a lower third. Monica McNutt and Carolyn Peck, both talented broadcasters, were essentially left to fill dead air around a format that gave them nothing to work with. It wasn't their fault. You can be the best commentator in the world and still struggle when the production around you feels like it was planned during a lunch break. Fans in live chats were still typing hello to each other, still settling in, still getting snacks and pulling up their prediction brackets when the first picks were already done. People literally missed announcements because they assumed there would be some kind of buildup, some kind of preamble, some acknowledgement that this was a significant moment. And by the time they looked up from their phones, the names were already on screen and the broadcast was moving on. Compare that to how the NBA handles similar events. When the NBA does a draft lottery, they build an entire evening around it. There are celebrity guests. There are analysis segments breaking down what each lottery position means for franchise trajectories. There's genuine suspense built through pacing and presentation. When the NBA did its most recent expansion-related events, every pick was treated like it mattered because the league understood that making each moment feel important is what keeps eyeballs on the screen. The WNBA has access to the same production infrastructure, the same parent company resources, the same broadcast partners, and yet, somehow, the biggest moment of the offseason looked and felt like an afterthought. Section 3. Why presentation isn't optional anymore. 400 words. And this is where the conversation gets uncomfortable but necessary. Because the production quality of this expansion draft doesn't exist in a vacuum. It feeds directly into a narrative that the WNBA has been fighting against for its entire existence. One comment during the live broadcast captured the frustration perfectly. Someone wrote that this right here is exactly why people don't take women's sports seriously. Now, that statement on its own is too broad. The basketball itself absolutely commands respect. The skill level in the WNBA has never been higher. The athleticism, the strategy, the competitiveness, all of it is elite. Anyone who watches a full WNBA game with an open mind walks away impressed. But here is the uncomfortable truth that the league's leadership needs to sit with. When your own packaging of your own product feels like a discount version of what other leagues deliver, you are actively reinforcing the perception that your product is lesser. Not because it is lesser, but because you're presenting it that way. First impressions are everything in entertainment. And for casual fans who tuned into this expansion draft because they heard about it through Caitlin Clark's massive social media reach, or because ESPN promoted it during a commercial break, what they saw was a league that didn't seem particularly excited about its own milestone. If the WNBA itself can't be bothered to make the expansion draft feel like a big deal, why should a casual viewer treat it like one? This is a leadership issue, pure and simple. Someone in a boardroom made the decision that 30 minutes was sufficient. Someone approved a format that prioritized GM interviews over player features. Someone decided that the first Canadian franchise in league history didn't warrant a production that matched the magnitude of the moment. And every single one of those decisions told the audience, both existing fans and potential new ones, that the WNBA doesn't yet understand what it has. The league keeps pointing to its growth metrics, and those metrics are real. Ratings are up significantly. Attendance records have been broken across multiple franchises. Merchandise sales are surging, driven largely by the star power of its top players. Sponsorship deals are getting bigger and more prestigious. All of that is legitimate progress. But progress in the business office means nothing if the on-screen presentation doesn't match the moment. Now, beneath the production disaster, Genuinely important basketball decisions were being made. And the Portland Fire walked away from this expansion draft with a roster that tells you exactly what kind of team they're trying to build from day one. They selected Sarah Barker from the Sparks, a player who brings physicality and toughness to the front court. They grabbed Khloe Bibby from the Indiana Fever, an Australian guard whose three-point shooting and floor spacing ability made her a valuable piece of Indiana's rotation when she was healthy. Bibby dealt with injuries during her time in Indiana, which limited her impact, but when she was on the court, her ability to stretch the floor created driving lanes for her teammates and opened up offensive sets that the Fever desperately needed. Maya Caldwell came over from the Atlanta Dream. Bridget Carleton from the Minnesota Lynx, a Canadian player who now gets to be part of a franchise representing another part of North American basketball culture. Emily Engler from the Washington Mystics. Leonie Fiebig from the Dallas Wings, a versatile wing who can guard multiple positions and has shown flashes of being a connector on offense. Haley Jones, also from the Wings, whose basketball IQ and passing ability from the forward position give Portland a player who can facilitate in ways that most players her size simply cannot. Carly Samuelson from the Golden State Valkyries, a shooter who can space the floor. Nika Mule from the Seattle Storm, a defensive-minded guard whose intensity and competitiveness are evident every second she's on the court. And Shaturia Walker-Kimbrough from the Mystics, a veteran presence who has been around long enough to know what winning cultures look like. Look at that roster collectively, and a picture emerges. Portland is building around versatility and defense. They want players who can switch assignments, guard multiple positions, and compete physically. That's a smart foundation for an expansion team because defensive identity is often the fastest way to establish a culture. You might not have the offensive firepower to outscore established teams in year one, but you can make every opponent earn everything they get. None of this was discussed during the broadcast in any meaningful way. Where was the analysis of how these players fit together? Where was the breakdown of Portland's defensive philosophy? All of that storytelling was left on the table. And then there is Toronto. The Tempo made selections that suggest they are thinking bigger picture, more strategically aggressive than a typical expansion franchise might be expected to operate in its inaugural draft. Julie Allemand came from the Sparks, a crafty point guard with international experience who knows how to run an offense and manage tempo. Mariah Carney from the Valkyries. Lexi Held from the Phoenix Mercury, a guard who can score at all three levels and has shown she can create her own shot in crunch time situations. Kayla Thornton from the New York Liberty, a veteran forward with championship experience who has been through deep playoff runs and knows what it takes to win when the stakes are highest. Maisha Hines-Allen from the Lynx, a physical forward who crashes the boards and plays with an edge that can set the tone for an entire locker room. Monique Billings from the Mercury, another physical frontcourt presence with rebounding instincts. Nikolina Milic from the Connecticut Sunday. Alicia Clark from the Las Vegas Aces, a savvy veteran wing who has been part of championship teams and brings that intangible understanding of what winning requires beyond just talent. Nyara Sabali from the Liberty, a young forward with enormous physical tools who might be the highest upside player Toronto selected. And then there are the two picks that carry the most weight emotionally and strategically. Marina Mabrey from the Connecticut Sun was Toronto's unrestricted free agent selection. Each expansion team could only pick one unrestricted free agent, and Toronto used theirs on Mabrey. That is a significant signal. It means Toronto's front office is confident, perhaps very confident, that they can actually sign Mabrey. And then there is Christy Wallace from the Indiana Fever. For Fever fans, this one hits differently. Christy wasn't a star in the traditional sense. She wasn't putting up 20 points a game or making all-star teams. But what she represented to that 2024 Fever roster, and specifically to Caitlin Clark, goes beyond stats. Early in Clark's rookie season, when opposing teams were testing how physical they could get with the most hyped rookie in league history, Christy Wallace was the first teammate to visibly and vocally step in. She made it clear through her actions that the Fever were not going to allow their rookie to be pushed around without consequences. That moment resonated, and now she's building something new in Toronto. With the expansion draft in the rearview mirror, the focus now shifts to what comes next. And for Indiana Fever fans, the off-season chess match is about to get very interesting very quickly. The good news first. Sophie Cunningham was not selected in the expansion draft. Michaela was not selected either. Both players that Fever fans were terrified of losing are still potentially available. But here is where it gets complicated, especially with Sophie. She's a free agent. That means she can sign with any team that offers her a deal. Just because Portland and Toronto didn't take her in the expansion draft doesn't mean she's automatically returning to Indiana. The question becomes whether the Fever's front office values what Sophie brings enough to make a competitive offer, and whether Sophie, who by all accounts thrived in the chemistry of that 2024 team, prioritizes staying with a group she connected with over potentially earning more money elsewhere. Chemistry is a real thing in basketball. It's not just a word coaches throw around in press conferences. When players genuinely enjoy being around each other, when they trust each other on and off the court, the product on the floor improves in ways that don't show up on spreadsheets. The 2024 Fever had that. Multiple players described the locker room culture as unlike anything they'd experienced in their careers. That kind of environment doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't rebuild easily once you start losing pieces. Indiana already lost Christy Wallace and Khloe Bibby to the expansion draft. If Sophie walks in free agency too, the core of that team that defied expectations starts looking very different heading into 2026. Then there is the draft. Indiana holds the 10th overall pick, which is their first selection. And the debate within the fan community is genuinely fascinating because it forces a philosophical choice about roster construction. Option 1 is drafting a backup point guard. Caitlin Clark is obviously the franchise cornerstone, but she can't play 40 minutes every single game across a full WNBA season. Option 2 is drafting a true center. Caitlin, evasive, a rim protector and rebounder who can anchor the defense and give Indiana a physical presence in the paint. Both needs are legitimate. Both are arguably urgent. But with one pick at 10, you can only address one. And whatever you choose, you're living with the consequences of what you didn't choose for at least another season. Stepping back from the specifics of any one team, the expansion draft and the offseason it kicked off forces a broader question about where the WNBA actually stands as a league heading into what should be its defining era. The talent pipeline has never been deeper. The college game is producing stars who arrive in the WNBA ready to contribute immediately, which wasn't always the case 10 or 15 years ago. The star power at the top of the league is legitimate. A'ja Wilson is a generational player who dominates games in ways that demand your attention regardless of what sport you normally watch. Caitlin Clark has the kind of cultural pull that transcends basketball entirely. The sort of magnetism where people who have never watched a game in their lives know her name and want to see what the fuss is about. Angel Reese brings an energy and a confidence that makes her must-watch television every time she steps on the court. The business side is moving in the right direction. The new CBA is a landmark agreement. Charter flights, improved salaries, revenue sharing, all of it signals that the league and the Players Association understand that investing in the product creates returns. Sponsorship deals are getting larger and more prominent. New ownership groups with deep pockets and legitimate business acumen are entering the space. 2 new franchises in Portland and Toronto represent geographic expansion into markets that can support professional women's basketball at the highest level. All of that is real. All of that matters. And all of that makes the production failure of the expansion draft even more frustrating, because the gap between what the WNBA is becoming and how the WNBA presents itself has never been wider. The on-court product is exceptional. The business fundamentals are improving rapidly, but the packaging, the presentation, the way the league puts its biggest moments on display for the world to see, that is still lagging behind in ways that undercut everything else. Imagine for a second what this expansion draft could have been. Picture a 2-hour primetime special on ESPN. It opens with a cinematic package narrated by one of the players, maybe A'ja Wilson or Diana Taurasi, talking about what expansion means for the future of the sport. Each pick is treated like a moment, with highlight packages, live player reactions, and strategic analysis. Instead, we got 30 minutes that felt like a league meeting accidentally got broadcast to the public. The league cannot afford these kinds of unforced errors. Not now. Not when the window of opportunity is as wide open as it has ever been. Every major professional sports league in history has had a moment where the public's attention shifted toward them, where cultural relevance and athletic excellence aligned to create a growth explosion. And the leagues that capitalized on those moments, the ones that matched the quality of their product with the quality of their presentation, those are the leagues that sustained their growth and became permanent fixtures in the sports landscape. The WNBA is in its window right now. Everything is pointing up. But windows don't stay open forever. The attention that Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and A'ja Wilson have brought to the league is a gift, but it's also a responsibility. Sports is entertainment. Entertainment requires showmanship, pacing, drama, and above all, respect for the audience that showed up. The WNBA keeps saying they're ready for the spotlight. The question after this expansion draft is whether they're actually ready to perform once the lights come on. Portland and Toronto deserved better. The players deserved better. And the fans watching deserved better. Because moments fade. Legacies require intention. Stay locked with my channel Simply Explained for more updates.